Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will begin our discussion of Chapter 8 of Observing the Craft, the Observant Lodge.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have all four of our lovely hosts are here today. We have very worshipful brother David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. Worshipful brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. Worshipful brother Jarrod Dunham of Penticton 147 in Penticton, British Columbia. And I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek 243, and we meet in Montlake Terrace, Washington. So I guess my first question is, what did you guys think of the format of this one? It seemed a little more practical minded this time, and it seemed like it went like he had a progression that he went through this time from the beginning of entering a lodge to, I just whacked my microphone with my hand. That's always good for an audio recording. From there to the what the lodge does, there seemed to be a more, I don't know, a direct timeline to it in my mind than there had been in previous chapters. Did you guys feel that way?
Yeah.
Am I having the feel?
No, it was definitely a great review of the book, and it was in that chronological kind of format. I thought it was great. It was a lot of things in here that made me go, and it was. I'm not sure how, I mean, if somebody, when you find out that you realize that some of these things aren't actually happening in your lodge, and then you wish that they were, how do you go about implementing that, right? Or trying to get everybody to participate. Therein lies the challenge, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if your lodge and other members would just, if they would just be open enough to agree and accept that some of these things maybe should be implemented, chapter 8 would probably be enough. You can almost say, read chapter 8, as long as you don't disagree too much with the basics of what chapter 8 is saying. I think chapter 8 is a whole synopsis of which is designed to be, really, a synopsis of the whole book. But the nice thing about the other chapters is that he really goes into detail and describes what it is he's explaining that's in chapter 8. Of course, he talks about more things in chapter 8, but there's definitely a review process there. It's Jarrod's giving me the funky look, though.
Well, no, my takeaway is that chapters 1 through 7 are the observant Mason. Chapter 8 is how you bring it all together.
Okay.
So it's like, so for me, you need what chapters 1 through 7, because this is what you should do. And then chapter 8 is, this is what your lodge will be like when all of you do what I tell you to do.
That's a good fast master, Jarrod. That's a good fast master.
That's actually a good observation. I found this one to be a little less strident too than some of the other ones. Like, he even says, just because someone doesn't wear their tie doesn't mean you have to throw them out of lodge. And
you don't have to.
There are a couple of things like that sort of he seemed to, like I said, it was a little less strident. He softened the blow a bit of some of his assertions that the previous chapters.
Yeah, but he, in all throughout it, though, he did emphasize, maintaining the highest of standards in every aspect of it, which I think, is essential for a quality lodge experience. You get, I get several pages in now, but, observance is a choice followed by a commitment to action, right? And so You really do have to have the buy-in from your whole lodge to, if you want it to be a representation of what this book refers to it as, right? You know.
One of the things early on he mentions, he's talking about the dues and that kind of thing, but in the first couple pages, he seems to cross over a bit to talk about the temple and the repair of the temple and the refurbishment and that kind of stuff, and that dues should be sufficient to cover that. And I guess I always think that those are separate. Temple boards or building boards and building management is separate from the lodge really experience. And so I'm just curious. I wrote that, are we unique as Washington in that respect, that we have a strict defining line between temple boards and the lodge, and so the temple board is really responsible. Now the temple board may have to go to the body if it's a single-use building or something to that effect, may have to go to the body and say, hey, we need money, and the only way to get that money is either through an assessment or dues, I suppose. But we try to detach our dues from the building, so they aren't really part of it. The building in our situation should pay for itself, and if it doesn't, then should we really have a building?
But wait, is yours a single use building?
It's not. We're fortunate.
Like, so I think what he's talking about here are lodges like my old lodge, where it was a one single use building with one lodge in it.
Yeah.
And then that here happened. There's quite a few lodges that are like that are,
sure,
they have a lodge hall. They're the only lodge that meets in that hall. So,
and could it not be used for rentals at all? Any kind of public?
Most of the single use lodge halls that I've been in don't really have. I mean, they might have a small banqueting room that could be used for something, but they're not really rentable to other things. They've been around for a while, and they were built back when the lodge had large enough attendance or membership to cover the cost of that.
Yeah, and I don't know, in our district we have more multi-use ones. Like in Armstrong, they have a liquor store that rents out the space down below. In Kelowna, we've got 4 stores that have retail space. In Enderby, it's a single use. I believe in Salmon Arm, it's a single use as well. But they have the whole bottom floor for their banquet room. And so, and they're probably old enough that they have enough money to not worry about that, right? I think Revelstoke even has tenants down below, retail tenants, right? So,
well, that lends the question. You said that the lodge has enough money. Well, how does it have enough money? In the years past, it charged significant enough to have built a war chest to cover the building costs, and now the new members get to ride for free on the coattails of the past Masons.
Well, I think in some of them I've heard that some of them have been bequeathed money from past members that have passed on and
Sure.
left money to the lodge.
Sure.
And also some of them were, I mean, back in the railroad days, they did build up quite the war chest for that. Those things back then too, right? So, but it does make you think about the ones now. If they, if they had mortgages or if they had things that they had to worry about other than regular maintenance, it would be a lot more challenging, I'm sure.
Yeah. I think you had talked, when we were in shows past, we talked about the cost of dues, and we did an analysis of all of our lodges in our areas. And you had mentioned so simply that it was just too easy that, we'd add up all our costs and divide by the number of members, and that's what our dues are. Yep. And so I wonder, in those single use buildings, are they really truly analyzing the total cost of running that building? If it costs $100,000 for it to pay taxes and maintenance expectations and all the lights and utilities and all that stuff, and then divided by 100 members, is it really charging $1,000 a year to the member to really pay for it, or are they depending on that war chest, the bequeath, and all the other?
Good question. Do you know your history in the Jarrod? Do you know what it was like for Headley and whatnot?
I mean, like, how did they
Or-
do the budgeting?
Yeah, well, yeah.
How they set the fees?
How did they
No.
cover these things? Did they have exorbitantly high dues, or?
No, no, they weren't exorbitant. None of us have exorbitantly high dues.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me how things have changed over the years, whether they have money or not. Many lodges are just they don't pay attention. They think, oh, we don't realize it's going to cost $100,000 to fix that roof.
Yeah.
And in 20 years. And so they're not planning for it.
More often than not, it's because I'm going to digress. More often than not, it's because the person who's sitting in the chair doesn't really understand the concept of budgeting.
Well, we'll talk about that later in the chapter, right?
Maybe.
And essentially in those lodges that are single use, so let me ask, in those, I know what I'm probably focusing on this way too much, but in those lodges that are single use, do they still have a temple board, or does the lodge function as the temple board, the oversight? Do you have a group, the committee that runs the building?
My understanding, the couple times I've dealt with it, there's been they separate the building, they separate the temple board from the lodge. Yeah. So they're even in single use. There's usually, because we had to do that up here. Because the problem is that up here in BC, a Masonic lodge can't technically own a building because they don't technically exist. So we had to set up not for profit organizations in order to technically own the buildings. Yeah. So it's kind of a legal thing we have to do more than anything else.
Sounds familiar. Well, the reason I ask is that while in some lodges the master is in charge of the lodge, even if there's a temple board, many times the master is in charge of the temple board, and it kind of runs the whole thing. And they fluidly talk amongst the lodge. Will talk about. We go to district meetings, and inevitably, when the lodge master gets up, or whoever their representatives gets up to talk about how their lodge is doing, inevitably they talk about their building and there's things that are happening with their building.
Right.
And that really should have nothing to do with. Although it could affect the success of the lodge because of their actions and their costs and those kind of things. But anyway, it's always fascinating to talk about that stuff for me anyway. Maybe not everybody else. He talks about it and what having a quality experience, which would also in turn relay to a quality building and quality facilities and all those kind of things. So,
but I think the point he was trying to make more than that was the fact that our financial obligations are too often divided amongst other bodies, and that if we actually, because an observant, he always makes that point, is that the symbolic lodge is the end all and be all, and that if we want a healthy lodge, you focus on that, and that if we actually spent our time and resources focusing on that, our experiences would be better.
Yeah,
and I think that's the point. That's why he brought up the buildings and stuff.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any chance that we could get, even myself, if I were to say I'm going to spend $1,000 at Scottish Rite, would I also in turn make a in-kind donation to my lodge for $1,000?
Right.
I bet we would. I bet if we were to make those statements to all the people that are concordant group members,
invariably that's always the argument that comes up whenever we talk about, we should raise our dues, and everyone's like, oh, I'm already paying, and I'm like, you're not paying us that money, so that don't become part of the conversation.
Right. Yeah, lots of dirty looks when that happens.
Yep. Actually, we actually just raised our dues $25, we just there's a notice of motion coming, or there was a notice of motion put forth that we will be raising our dues $25 to $200 a year.
200? You're so cheap.
Yeah, and not one guy balked about it in our meeting. I mean, But I mean, you consider what you're paying for all these other things, and then one guy stands up and said, "For those who golf, some of them spend more than $2,500 a year in golf, right? Yep. And that's just for casual golfing. That's not even a membership, right? So, he threw that out as a comparison and didn't hear a peep from anybody else,
nope.
Right?
Yeah. We just raised ours to 8 times minimum wage, which is about $150, and I think it should have been 10. Just to make math easier, but even at that, it's at 10 at 100. even at 10 times, it's still not probably enough.
Yep.
Really.
$360 a year should be the minimum. $20 a
$1
month.
a day.
Is that $30 a month?
And how'd you come to that?
It's slightly less than $1 a day.
Hmm.
That I honestly, I mean, where else could, like, I don't know.
But what?
I mean, if you think,
But
if
but
you
then
added,
he does pose the question: are you giving them value for that?
Right.
well, and that's the thing is, and that's what we always say whenever this discussion comes up, is that there's but then it becomes a chicken and the egg thing. Is that you can't do good sit down proper meals, without it costing, and if they're not going to pay for it until they have the good and proper meal, like you can't, but yeah. Matt's being very quiet.
When the subject of dues and stuff come up, I always say I think dues should be $1,200 to $1,500 a year, which would automatically include a quality meal at your every meeting, probably 10 meetings a year, and then you should it should include your Grand Lodge costs. It could be like $100 to $150 to the Grand Lodge, which would be 4 times almost what we are charged now. It could be $100 to the Grand Master or the Grand Lodge charity, which in our case was Washington Masonic Services. They would automatically include a ticket to our lodge officers, our lodge leadership retreat, and then another ticket to which I always wanted to have a fall symposium of some kind, which I think we're kind of morphing in. We're going to promote the esoteric conference, maybe we're in place of that, but some major events, good quality dinners, charitable or philanthropic donations, some Grand Lodge costs, things like that. And then there'll still be money left over for the lodge to do things with what they want to do with.
Yep. And maybe if somebody paid that much in their annual dues, they might actually show up on a regular basis, because then the other guys, they'll bitch and complain. Why am I going to pay for all these meals when I don't go there? Right. Well, start showing up. Maybe we get that commitment level out of them instead of the excuses all the time.
So that actually brings up an interesting, one of the things that I underlined. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for this is I underlined the sentence where he says that one's attendance in lodge is part of one's obligation as a Mason. So that always makes, so if you don't go to lodge, you're not a Mason?
No, that's not what he's saying. But that's the part of the obligation, or part of your obligation to the lodge is participation, right? When they talk about guarding the West Gate and explaining to the postulant the commitments expected. When I'm the first guy that meets every seeker that comes to our door unknown, and it's one of the first I cover that at the first meeting now, every single time. Yes, your work and your family come before lodge, right? And they should always be more important than lodge to you. However, when you are joining the lodge, it is expected that our meetings are the second and fourth Monday of every month, and that we expect you to participate. You will not get out of lodge anything if you don't attend regular, and so that is a minimum expectation there. And then I go into DDGM official visits and installations and visiting, and real commitments. Your average Mason in our district is out 3 to 4 times a month. Your busier Masons in our district are out 3 times a week, right? But in our district, in District 9, your average attending Mason, your participating Mason, is out at lodge 3 to 4 times a month.
Visiting shouldn't be mandatory.
No, it's not mandatory.
But you just said that's you're out 3 to 4 times a month.
No. I said the average Mason is out, right? Visiting, doing other things.
You're saying the average. The average
Right.
Mason. The average Mason should only feel obligated to go to their meetings.
Yes, that's their minimum obligation, is what I tell them. I said, but those who are looking for brotherhood and those who are looking for the fraternal aspect, You're only going to get that if you visit. Now, then I said, you can get burnout. I talk about burnout and doing way too many things, right? And so I cover all aspects of the spectrum, from your 2 meeting a month guy to your, 4 meetings a week, right? Kind of guy, right? So I talk about worrying about burnout, and then I talk about all the concordant bodies that are going to be knocking on your door after you're a master mason, and don't be in a hurry, but
don't join at all.
or don't join at all if you're not prepared to make a commitment.
But shouldn't the lodge be having their regular meetings plus other coordinated events that in some respect might take up that time? Not he wouldn't be able to travel because he's busy with his lodge.
I feel that in an ideal world, your lodge should have something going every week. That you should have between your board of general purposes and your regular, and I almost said emancipated, but that's not right. Regular and what's the other kind of meeting?
Emergent.
Thank you. The other E word, the regular and emergent meetings and practices. You should be going to your lodge usually about once a week.
Yep. In the perfect world, yep.
Well, ideal world.
Yeah.
In an ideal situation. We're starting to do that. I finally, well, no, I'm gonna go off on a head. Finally got them to agree to do ritual practice.
Excellent.
Nice.
Excellent. Some guys need to do that more often, right?
Yeah,
and actually what we've done, one of the things that we're doing in our mentorship program is that we're planning on meeting on the emergent meeting night for helping the candidates doing their prove up work and other guys doing their ritual work on those nights. And then if we happen to have an emergent meeting that has to happen, then we won't have that practice night. We'd probably reschedule for another night, but we're scheduling them that way anyways.
No, just keep doing it. Even if you're not having the meeting, have the practice.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. We're going to have the practices unless a meeting is to take place.
Oh, I see what you said. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we are going to use that night, and those that want to practice their ritual can come to that night, and there will be somebody there from the mentorship program to help them. All the candidates that are going through that are working on their memory work for their prove ups, that'll be the night that we do that. We used to do them every Thursday, right? But we thought, you know what? We schedule ourselves for the second and fourth Monday. Let's use that fourth Monday if it's not being used for a regular for an emergent meeting. Right. So now trying to get back on point. Matt's been real quiet, but he's smiling in the background. You got anything that you want to bring up in this first part of this chapter?
I guess is the short answer. There's nothing that comes to mind. I said my two pieces right in the beginning there. There's definitely, I guess I was amused by the conversation going off the track, but
well,
it's not the first time.
It's not really necessarily off track. We're talking about petitioners and the Westgate and whatnot, but the other thing, the other aspect of what he goes into here is, once a petition is received and accepted for ballot, then there's the committee that goes out. We do a lot of work. We meet, I try to have each postulant meet, or we call him a seeker, meet with 3 different members of the lodge before we'll even give him the memory test. And we won't accept his petition until he's successfully completed a memory test, right? And then we send out the visitation committee after we receive the petition, right? So, there's lots of opportunities for us to, answer the difficult questions, to give lots of input and feedback as to the expectations of lodge and commitments, right? So I think that's one thing that we're doing very well at now. which we may not have been as diligent and good at that before.
What I don't understand is he talks about when meeting with the master, meeting with somebody, the designee of the master, and if basically if it doesn't seem to jive, the conversation doesn't seem to jive, he talks about placing them in a different lodge.
Yes, I've seen that.
And I think, why is it okay for him to be a Mason in a different lodge, but not in your own? I mean, I get that the intent is that there's different cultures in the different lodges. I get that. But ultimately, does a guy really, I think we've all would admit that our expectations have changed, good or bad, over the years. And I am not the same person or Mason that I was when I first joined. And so if I had joined a different lodge that I thought was what I thought I wanted and then didn't deliver it, or maybe it's like, well, I'm not ready for this, am I not going to attend? And so I don't, the idea that there's such drastic differences between lodges still troubles me. I know I'm not looking for the McDonald's of Freemasonry, but I still think, and he talks about it, that the standards of Freemasonry were developed for that purpose, right? That there's supposed to be some bit of standardization among lodges. And I think, yes, there can be some varying degrees of quality and of culture and customs that each lodge might produce, but it shouldn't be a completely different experience, in my opinion, from lodge to lodge. You shouldn't go, well, they didn't teach me that or didn't do that for me. Well, why didn't they? I mean, Matt's got his mouth open for questions, so I'll stop there.
I think I would say that admittedly, the point of this book is that I think that Brother Hammer would like all lodges to be observant lodges. But I think in practice, in the short run at least, that a genuinely observant lodge along these lines would stick out from 95, 98, 99.9999% of other lodges. And so you would have, if this guy's looking for the backslappy fraternal masonry that existed 20 years ago or whatever it was, that there's, this lodge might not be for him kind of thing. I disagree. I think there are differences in lodges. I mean, if you just look at my lodge versus whatever, Esoterica, there are significant differences there.
How do you mean?
Well, they're more along this observant line of, more certain things are expected, writing essays between degrees. I don't exactly know everything, so I'm probably going to say something dumb out of ignorance that does not exactly jibe with their expectations. But they're much more along this line, and my lodge is not. And therefore, if one showed up at one or the other looking for the other, then.
So I just got to add this in there before we get wrap this topic up. I'm of the mindset like David. I think we should all be the same, and I don't think there's a reason. The only reason that I think somebody would, or I would refer somebody to another lodge, is if they were, like, for example, an ex RCMP, and there was another lodge that had a whole bunch of ex RCMP. He might feel a little more at home there. He might feel a little more connected to those brothers. But in general terms, I think we're all offering the same thing, and we all should be. And if we're not, well, then to me that's an affinity type lodge. And if they're looking for a particular thing like education, or they want to delve into things, there are other bodies once they become a Master Mason, like the Asler College, where we can point them to that, or things along those lines, right, where you can give them a little direction. And there's education lodges now, which are a group of guys from different lodges putting on more focused things. And I think other than that, though, I think general lodges are all the same, or should be.
I think we should come back and talk more about this.
I think you're right, because we can go deep on that.
I think my hand has been called. So thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. As always, please feel free to comment, or not just feel free to, but feel obligated to comment on our YouTube and social media platforms. And on behalf of David and Stephen and Jarrod and myself, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. Goodbye.